As we move on from the harsh, dim winter hours and prepare for the chorus of new life and growth that comes with spring, it's the perfect time to talk about death. Yep, that's right. Today we're discussing the last book ever written by influential atheist author and speaker Christopher Hitchens before his untimely death in 2011. And we're outside because I wanted to. Now, even though I'm an atheist, I only recently deconverted and deconstructed, and I never really was familiar with much atheist content on YouTube, and as a member of Gen Z, Hitchens was not a figure that I was aware of during his prime, but as I moved over to more skeptical and atheist sides of YouTube, it's been pretty much impossible not to become familiar with this intellectual powerhouse and master of wit. So I decided this year to give it a try and read my first ever Hitchens book, coincidentally the last book he would ever have the chance to write. Now, if you're unaware, Mortality is more of a collection of essays than it is a cohesive narrative, and it was written during his health decline as he died of throat cancer. I'll refrain saying that he struggled against cancer, battled, or fought against cancer, as per Hitchens' own rejection of these phrases. The book is a relatively easy read in the sense that it's short, but it's jam-packed with the type of thought-provoking material you might expect from such a man who's facing the stark reality of this mortal coil and the impending end thereof. One thing that I found very captivating about Mortality is that it gives you a glimpse, a very visceral glimpse, into the fragility of even the cleverest among us. Hitchens often remarks that he must remind himself that he doesn't have a body, but rather he is a body. And that comment really stuck with me because I often think of my mind or my inner true self as sort of just steering the ship that is my body, rather than simply being an integral part of it. Reading as Hitchens described his declining physical state and the ways in which it prevented him from writing and expressing himself as he wished was a very sobering demonstration of the fact that we often struggle to think of ourselves as material beings, flesh and blood, bound by these limitations that we often have little to no control over, but we are just that. I'd like to imagine myself, my mind, my inner self, as somehow transcending these worldly hurdles, but alas, it doesn't. And Hitchens understood that as he wrote during his last years and months. You'll also find historical, philosophical, and mythological references sprinkled throughout the book, which is something that I felt served very well to deepen Hitchens' kind of sharp, razor-edge commentary. And I also just appreciated, as someone who likes to learn new things, a lot of the references I was unfamiliar with. Hitchens also has a unique way of speaking about illness in particular, in that he often uses allegorical language to talk about the dialect, cultural difference, taboos, and kind of residents of Tumor Town, as he calls it. This use of language, I felt, was especially effective in communicating just how isolating illness can be, in that it in some ways creates a parallel reality for the bearer of the illness, because they speak to so many different people throughout their day-to-day. They interact in different ways with the people that they know, and now they know new people. They use almost this different dialect, the language of doctors, the jargon, medical jargon, right? And suddenly there's this different culture, the culture of the hospitals and waiting rooms, all of this that they have to experience that no one else is going through. It really helps to illustrate how physical illness can also rob you of emotional and mental clarity, familiarity, and belonging. He details some of the offhand remarks and comments that he received during this time, and it made me realize that a lot of the pain of a disease like cancer is not only in the uncertainty and fear or in the intense physical agony, but also in the ways that the mundane can become grotesque and the grotesque can become mundane. Sitting in a chair waiting listlessly as poison was pumped through his vein, chemotherapy, right, became the norm for Hitchens, and yet things that he had done for a very long time that he was very used to, like going to book signings and having interactions with fans, in some ways became ugly because of all the ignorant comments he had to endure and the exhausting, repetitive conversations, the things that he had to go over and over again with people. And it made me think of the way that how uncomfortable we are with death, that we often, it seems, when confronted with a person who is dealing with illness, we expect them to make the idea of death more palatable, more acceptable to us, so that we can process it. But we don't really take what they're going through into account so much. We want them to joke it away or hide it or comfort us from the fact that we are in reality only one step behind them. And I found that very illuminating. Of course, Hitchens also touches on religious themes, and he recounts the reactions to his terminal diagnosis, which were varied in all the ways I'm sure you can imagine. Even when he's recounting the ways that people have quite literally told him to burn in hell, his wit, humor, and razor-edged metaphors not only stay intact, but serve to drive forward his philosophical musings and astute observations. And as I was thinking about my review to this book, I also realized just how rare writing like this is that openly and directly discusses death. In a culture where each of us are essentially programmed from birth to be death avoiders, to omit the terminology from our language, calling it passing away or leaving this earth, and we obscure it in the media, we make it absurd or funny or distant, far off. Seeing something like this, talking about death as death, is pretty uncommon. Some may describe Hitchens' approach to death and his lack of belief in an afterlife as sad or nihilistic, but personally I think honest or human would be more fitting synonyms. Reading Mortality didn't depress me, but it did renew me with a fresh vigor for pursuing my passions and leaving my mark on this world before I go back to the dust, before I die. It also gave me a new sense of compassion and understanding for some of the lesser thought of struggles of going through an illness like this. And in the end, it made me think about death, which I believe is a healthy thing for all of us to do, because when faced with the grim reality and inescapable conclusion of death, the only real response is to live. Airplane. Wait for that. Freaking kidding me.